But again, it's just about having an inspiring tool to help you maybe want to sit down to paint more. And I talk about this a lot with making sure that you surround yourself with things that inspire you and make you feel drawn to your art practice, because chances are you'll be drawn to paint more and to explore more. And ultimately, that's what I want for you, is really to enjoy the process of making, because we are very lucky to have it. And especially I feel like as a little bit of a grounding and mental health break with everything that, again, we're sort of pulled to do, art is always that one thing that we come back to again and again. So, yes, thank you again. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy filling the pages. And if you've been afraid to maybe put your marks in it, we're going to do that today. Okay. And don't open it up to the first page. I'm going to flip my camera so that you can see. Oh, we've got some waiting. Let me go ahead and admit you all. Um, and if filling that first page in your sketchbook worries you, then don't go to that first page. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit, actually. So you might think I'm zoomed out fully. Open your sketchbook to the center. I sort of done that throughout the process. This is another Etcher sketchbook that I use. But just open your book to the center of your sketchbook. That's one from Christmas that I did. You can see that I didn't fill. There's some more inspiration for some loose florals we'll be painting today. I didn't go to that first page and fill the first page in my sketchbook because sometimes, again, I'm just going to flip my video. It's intimidating when you're looking at a bound book and you're, sitting down to fill it for the first time. You can be intimidated by, maybe not painting something that you're happy with, or it's just that pressure. Go ahead and open it to the center, and we'll start at the center. Okay, that's the best part. Someone is asking size of paper. I believe this is a 5 by 7, maybe, so in and around that size. And that's typically the size that I like to paint on because it suits the size of brushes that I use. So I'm going to talk a little bit about supplies before we get to painting. And I don't want to spend a ton of time because I feel like everyone here has either taken a class with me or are familiar with watercolor. But I always like to paint on the smaller scale because my brushes are suited to that size. If I was painting larger, I would need to pull out larger brushes. And what I did do today is I pulled out a few brushes that aren't my Life I Design ones, because I realized that not everyone has my brushes. I'm just going to adjust my table a little bit there. So the brushes that I do typically use when I paint, regardless of if it's loose or if I'm filling in shapes that I've pre-drawn, are my round brushes, and those are the Life I Design brushes. But you don't need to, if you don't have those brushes, you don't need to feel like, I don't want you to feel like you can't achieve what I'm going to show you. But if you have round brushes, then I encourage you to use them for this process. It just helps with creating that shape that we're going for with the petals. The way that the brushes open up, it allows you to create some thin lines and some thick lines. So mine are quite pointy because I like to do sort of detailed edges. But again, the brushes that I have here, I have a Princeton, I'll even demonstrate with them too. I have a Princeton Heritage and a Princeton Neptune, which are sort of the OG brushes that I used prior to creating the Life I Design ones. And I also pulled out some real hair brushes. So Rosemary & Co., they tend to be more expensive, and I pulled them out because I have them. I've spent the money on them, and sometimes I like to paint with them. So they tend to be a little bit fluffier, so they'll offer an opportunity to create thicker, larger, bolder brush strokes. And they tend to hold a lot of water. So this one's a Winsor Newton. It's also a Sable. Great quality, but you don't need to spend the money on the Sable if you choose not to. And these Princeton, they don't say on the handles, but they are synthetic and they work just as well too. So take care of your brushes. They will last you a lifetime. Just make sure you don't stand them upright when they are still wet, and the ferrule will be protected, and they should, again, last you a lifetime. Okay. So paper, paint on whatever you have, but if you have a sketchbook, let's fill a couple of pages together. Okay. Brushes. Now the colors that I'm using, and maybe what I'll do is I'll even make some room here. I'm going to swatch them and then show you my table as well so that you can start to pull some colors too. And I will let you know if you have questions as we go. I'll let you know when I'm going to hop in the chat just to take a bit of a break to check in with you and go from there. So I have used some painter's tape to tape off just a clean border edge for my painting. And I do that because I really love the effect. And I'm going to paint sideways today. It just fills the camera a little bit better. And again, the orientation of a painting like this, it really doesn't matter which angle you view it at because we're keeping it really loose and interesting. So that's one reason why I love to do a bordered edge like this, is it gives me a nice clean border, but it also helps me to be a little bit looser with which way I'm going to interpret it. So paint that I love is the Decorators. This is Decorators tape. Oh, Delicate Surface. That's it. It was a D. So this is painter's tape for delicate surfaces. Really great. It doesn't rip off that top sort of layer of paper. I found this one. This was just at the dollar store, actually. It's Pro Painter tape, so it doesn't have to be amazing quality. And I think if it's not great quality, it's better so that it's not as tacky and it doesn't tear off that top edge of our paper. If you'd like, take a screenshot or a photo of this so you have it for reference. But as you can see, we're really going to use very similar brush strokes for all of our florals and even our leaves. Okay, and we're going to practice that in just a sec. Here is again my larger inspiration. And there are moments within this piece, and again, trying to recreate it sometimes is challenging, but I really love this leaf stem and how the colors bled together. And I really allowed the watercolor to come through and the properties of the watercolor to come through. So there'll be moments throughout your painting where you will be surprised, where maybe you'll enjoy what's happening with how your paint is starting to blend together and mix. That's the one thing about watercolor that I love. And I paint with other mediums, whether they're acrylic or oil, but with watercolor, the way the pigments react, depending on the color, creates this really beautiful effect on paper. And it's when we slow down and observe those moments that we really, I hope you get excited with painting with watercolor too. So we're going to try to look for those moments and really allowing the pigment to mix together. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about watercolor now as I swatch. So the colors that I chose, again, are Terre Verte. It's a new color to me. So if you've taken Watercolor Made Simple with me, it's not a color that I've used in many of my classes. I think I have used them in one of the more recent ones. It is a very transparent pigment that has a lot of slip. I might dispense a little bit more because I feel like I need quite a bit when I'm painting. It's a color by Winsor & Newton. They have a whole range of colors that I feel like are unique to them, but it's one that I really love, again, to create a bit of transparent green. Lemon yellow, and this is lemon yellow deep. If you have a titanium yellow, just lemon yellow, not lemon yellow deep, that'll work really well. I really like the effect of mixing it with the Terre Verte as well as the blue that I'm about to dispense now. And I chose cobalt blue because I haven't painted with it in a while. So I thought, let me explore the color. And when I do things like this, I get to experiment what colors look like when they're mixed together. So because I haven't used cobalt blue in a while, I'll start to understand when I start mixing it with yellow, the relationship, how they mix together, what kind of green they blend. And then that way, as I'm painting and I'm pulling colors for my next painting, I'll remember and I'll make notes even in my sketchbook of what colors I use to mix, and especially if they're colors that I really enjoy. So Kelly's asking, what color can we use if we don't have that green? Use a sap green, use an olive green. You can, again, customize those. Those two are probably my favorite greens to recommend. You can customize them by adding a bit of blue or a little bit of yellow to them. But yeah, I would do a sap green or an olive green. So this next color is Perylene Green. It's a green I'm starting to fall in love with. Again, I think it might be a color that only Winsor Newton offers, but something similar would be Undersea Green by Daniel Smith. That one's more granulating, which I love. But it's a color I'm exploring more, and I'm using it in a project I'm working on now. So I feel really excited to be using it today too. And it's like a really nice deep inky green. Buff Titanium. So if you've done Watercolor Made Simple online class with me, you know that one is a favorite, but I'm going to dispense this one. So this is a color by Wallace Seymour. It's a brand of watercolors that I picked up when I was in London a couple years ago. They're very mineral based. They are very granulating because I feel like they're so pure. And I noticed that they are drying out in the tube, even though I haven't used them very often. So I want to use them up. Okay, so it's a little bit less yellow, I guess, than the Daniel Smith Buff Titanium. And if you don't have Buff Titanium, that's okay. It's just a color that I really enjoyed mixing with some green. I don't know how much I'll use it today, but I'm going to dispense it so that I have it handy. Okay, and the last one is just a black color. It's again a color by that same Wallace Seymour. It's called Magnetite. And I'm using it because, as you can see, I'm struggling with dispensing it out of the tube. It's drying up. I wonder if I'll even be able to dispense it. So I was starting to declutter my studio. I think I'm going to go ahead and flip the camera while I'm struggling here so you don't see me struggling. You'll see it from the camera down. I'm trying to clear out the studio and use more of the supplies that I have in drawers and things like that. When you really get to know what colors you love, I always describe them as your favorite sweatshirt. You may have 10 sweatshirts in your closet, but you always go to your favorite one. I feel like the same is true when it comes to watercolor palettes or paints. Even if it's not watercolor, it's just colors that you're drawn to. So working outside of the box, like we're doing today with using a different color palette, helps you use up supplies. But it might also help you introduce a new color to your palette. So I may not be using this magnetite because it's dry. I'll have to get some scissors to open it up. If I really feel like I need it, I've got Payne's Gray. So if you don't have that color, grab Payne's Gray. I always have Payne's Gray handy. So I will dispense some Payne's Gray. And we're just going to go with it. And we're going to play and have fun. So let's get some Payne's Gray on the palette. Again, I'm not sure how much I'm going to use it. I really do want to focus on some yellows and some blues for the florals, but let's have it out on our palette so that we have access to it. Okay. So when we are painting florals, there are different angles that I like to focus on. Let me go ahead and get tight in here. Move my paint over. Different angles I like to focus on. When we look at a flower grows from the center point outwards. Okay, so if we're looking at a flower top down, so a flat lay of a flower, you've got that view. And then I also like to paint them at a side angle. So with the center of that flower looking upwards, so that I can paint again from the center going outwards and looking down on the flower. But then there are also moments too, even in here and here, sort of sideways, where we're going to foreshorten those front leaves. Oh, let me go, front petals a little bit. And we're always working from the center outward. So when we foreshorten, then we're able to create a little bit of depth to make it look like you're looking almost at a lower angle upwards towards those flowers. Okay. I'm just going to see if there's any other moments, but as you can see by the flowers here, they're all pretty similar. We're using the same stroke, which we're just about to start, and creating different looking flowers based on A, the color, so different color range here. B, how many petals we're including in that bunch. And C, the direction. Okay, so direction, if the flower is looking up, maybe looking down, or the viewer we're looking at a different angle. This takes practice, but I'm going to show you the technique to hopefully make it easier. And I just worked on one because I picked some forget-me-nots. I'm going to flip through at this page. Even though I used forget-me-nots as a reference, and you know what, I've got them behind me. I'm going to pull some so you can see. They're super tiny. And even though I used forget-me-nots, which are blue, I could still refer to the shape. Look how sweet they are. These grow in my garden. They're one of the wildflowers that I grow. But if you look at the shape again, they almost look fake. They're so cute. They grow from the center outwards, and you can see the viewpoint of this flower is top down, where the viewpoint of this flower here is sideways, so the profile, and then the viewpoint of this flower here is a little bit on an angle. So if you can use a reference in person, it's a really great way to start to examine and to move your reference around to be able to paint from. So that's what I did here. And I just changed the color and it made it feel like a completely different flower, right? So let's get started painting. So cute. I'm going to put that on my desk because it's sweet. Okay, so I have my reference handy so I can remember everything that I shared. And I think what I'll do is I'll use this Princeton Heritage. Now, when I'm painting, I always have a paper towel handy because it's how I control how much water is on my brush as well as how much paint is on my brush, okay? And I'm just going to load up my brush. So remember, watercolor needs water to flow. And look at that beautiful cobalt blue. So we're just going to go ahead and swatch it. So in case you don't have this cobalt blue, someone's asking the size. Size 8 is the size of my brush. And if you, and again, I always sort of caution, if you look at sizes of brushes from manufacturer to manufacturer, they're not the same. This Rosemary & Co. is a size 8 as well. Okay, they're relatively similar in size, but not entirely. And that's my Life I Design. They're actually quite similar. I'm surprised because often when we look at sizing of brushes, here are 2 6s side by side as well. 2 6s and 2 8s. So 6 and 8, 4 is what I like to paint with as well. A 0 or a 1 for detail is really great. But yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with and what you enjoy painting, what you like to hold in hand. So when I am painting florals, again, we're always starting from the center. So let's say that's my center point. And then we're working out. I'll move my dirty paper towel out of the way too. Oh, we've got some joining us. So I always start from the center and angling my brush so that I have the tip of the brush sort of touching the paper first. As I push down, you can even see that watercolor. I'm going slow, so I'm going to get some puddles, but as you push down, it starts to open up that barrel. Now, I haven't painted with this brush in a while, so I'm going to give myself some grace and some time to be able to work through sort of how much pressure I have to put on the brush or how little. And I'm actually even going to tone down. I think I have the exposure too high on this camera, so you can see. There we go. That's a better indication of the blue that I have. So again, if I start from the center, let it touch my page, I'm going to press down, release, and then down, release again, so that we can create that really nice petal. Okay. Now I like how the color looks on the page, and I'm kind of just getting warmed up and I'm swatching. I'm going to just dip my brush in my water. I'll go ahead and I want you to see this. And just remove a little bit of that water. So you can see there's a bit of paint still on my brush. And I want to see what happens if I just add a bit of water to that brush, but also to the paint. So I'm lightening the paint, but I feel like this brush needs quite a bit more water. Again, getting used to a new tool, it's going to take a little bit of time. I'm okay with that, but I'm just going to see how much water is left in this brush as I work on my little warm-up flower here. And when you're creating loose florals where you don't have a guide, it's really great to get warmed up again to start to see how the water is reacting.
Can you grab the check from inside
Oh, if you're just
from
joining,
Dad?
go ahead and mute yourself, please, and do the same. There we go. It's a really great way to just do a little bit of warm up to get to know your brush, how much water you need on the brush, and even how much pigment you have on your brush as well. Okay, so just a simple 5-point flower. And looking at the flower here, it's okay. It's maybe not interesting yet, but as it's still wet, remember you're in control when your water is still wet on your page or the pigment is still a little bit damp. I can just dab in wet on wet and start to move some of that paint around. I'll wash off my brush, give it a little dab, and then I can even remove some paint. So as it's still wet, maybe I don't like that heaviness at the top of the petal there, and I'm going to move that paint around. So don't feel that your first initial brush stroke has to be perfect. While it's still wet, you can pull, move, lift away, and play around with what's happening on your page here. Okay, and then even at this point, I'm going to grab some of that yellow that I have on my palette. So I'm just mixing a bit of yellow on the tip of my brush here. I'm just going to dab in some yellow and see what happens. And when I do this, I'm able to observe how the colors are mixing together on my page. So are they fighting? Are they blending? Yellow tends to be a pigment where the mineral of the pigment is quite large. So it will overpower the color that it's blending and mixing into. And in this case, I enjoy that because I kind of want the center to be a little bit yellow, thinking about that forget-me-not as my reference. Now I just dabbed my brush into the yellow so it's really concentrated. I'm going to show you what that looks like, Allie, actually. So just really concentrated, not a lot of water. And then what I can see is how nice and concentrated that center of the flower becomes. Um, as I'm sort of stippling and seeing what happens. So again, I'm observing how the yellow is moving into the blue. I know I had a lot more water here, so it's blending really nicely. And that's a really great start to warm up to see what's happening on the page as I start to paint the flower. Okay, let's do another one. So this flower is head down or sort of top down. And remember, we always start from the center working out. So I'm going to let's grab this Perylene green. We're going to paint a green one, only because I want you to be able to see the color. I'm even going to move my palette over so that I'm more comfortable. So I think someone asked about a green. What color greens don't have the green? Okay, I already answered that one. Great. So again, I'm going to think about the center of the flower. This flower, the point or the center is going to face the sky as if it was looking up towards the sun. So I'm going to start with the center. And because I'm not used to this brush, it's almost like I stopped for a second. I was like, what's in my hand? It's not one that I'm familiar with. So again, starting from the center, working outwards. And then starting from the center, I'm going to change the angle of my brush. So I don't want all of the petals to be consistent and even because in nature that doesn't happen. There should be inconsistency. And at some points, I allow the petals to touch and also have a bit of white space. And just because this is a dark, intense color, I'm lifting away. So I'm pulling away that paint. I'm going to show you here, wiping my brush off while it's still wet and pulling away that paint and wiping my brush off, just so you can see that Perylene green because it's one of my new favorites and it's been really fun to play with. And then at this point, remember, while it's still wet, I can just go ahead. I just dipped my brush into the water jar. Just going to clean my edges a little bit. And then my center, I'll use the yellow again. And then my center can be, I probably went a bit too high on that, can be right there. So there is a flower, it looks very structured, I have to say, I just looked up the screen. It is, you know, sorry, I've got someone who's waiting. Let's let them in. There I got distracted. Let's go ahead and dab a little bit more. And maybe I'm going to add another petal here, just again, warming up and playing around and seeing what happens. That feels better. Okay, so again, green, probably not the best choice for a flower, but I wanted you to see this Perylene green. It is a really pretty one too. Again, my moody greens. Okay, so that's a flower that's looking upwards. And because I'm going slow and I want to demonstrate the technique, I feel like they are a little bit more uniform than I would like. So again, if you want to create even more looser ones, you're going to get into a meditative, more intuitive process, but I want you to get the technique down before we start actually filling up that page that we have taped. Okay, let's do another one and let's use the buff titanium. So this one, remember when I dispensed that buff titanium, it was quite dry. So I need to add quite a bit of water to the mix to get that watercolor moving. So if you're finding that as you're painting, you're not getting the same effect in terms of just how fluid the movement of the brush is, it's because you don't have enough water in your paint mix. Now, this is a very opaque, chalky kind of paint or pigment. So it won't have that transparency that you see in the blue. So I have a lot of water in that little puddle. So it becomes very transparent. Ooh, and I like how the blue is starting to mix over here in the titanium. Let's see how that looks. So it'll have different effects, meaning it will look different when you're painting with it. It'll feel different when you're painting with it. And that's great because that's what we're sort of practicing and figuring out. So I'm going to paint one and I'm going to try to do it without talking through the steps. I want you to kind of maybe take a moment and observe and let's just see what happens. Okay, I'm looking at my references around me and I'm going to paint one that's kind of sideways. Again, because of my hand, I don't want to turn the page as I'm demonstrating because again, I feel like you get dizzy when I do that, but feel free to turn the page. If it feels more comfortable for you, I might even angle my page a little bit. That will help with perspective. So I'm going to again start from the center and I'll create this same sort of petal and maybe even join the petals so that they're closer together. But what I'll do for the bottom petals, I am going to turn my page a little bit, is I'm going to shorten that brush stroke and pull my brush out a little bit. So it doesn't go up and sort of as uniform. I'm going to pull it out and shorten it a little bit. So do you see how much that's changed already from the other flowers that we've just painted? Okay, it's a little bit more rustic and a little bit more, add a bit of water to my brush, organic, and it feels like it's looser, okay? So not as structured. And then what I can do is let's add the cobalt blue to the mix. I'm going to zoom out a bit so you can see, now you can see my sketchbooks at an angle. I'll grab some of that cobalt blue, bring it into the mix, and I want quite a bit of it, and then see what happens as I start to add it to the center. And sometimes for the stamen, I like to dab. I like to maybe just do one whoosh and then see what happens. But even though my brush strokes were still quite wet, the pigment's not moving because the buff titanium has a very large particle to it, so that the cobalt blue is a finer pigment. It won't bleed as easily. Okay, so the buff titanium is a stronger pigment, just like the yellow. Okay, let's paint that again because I really like that demo. And I'm going to use the blue again, so lots of water. And I do have a bit of that buff titanium still on my brush. I'm okay with that. Move this down so you can see how much water. Bring in some more of that cobalt. And the cobalt blue has quite a bit of red undertone. And it's not, I typically look for a blue with more of a green undertone, but it's quite nice. I have to say, if you were painting skies, it would be a great color. Okay, so loading up my brush, and I might even change my brush next too. So again, same flower, I'm gonna paint it sideways. So there's my first petal. There's my second little petal, and I might even go longer here, longer and outwards. And even I can go back here if I want to extend this petal. Remember, while it's wet, you still have that ability. Without turning my page, I'm working from the center outwards. And then I'm gonna go sideways. I'm gonna show you this one. And I'm just going to use the side of my brush here to create a shorter petal and see what happens. Okay, so I'm not going to go in the same direction. I just use the center of my brush to work sideways, and that creates a really unique perspective there for the petal. I'm just going to fix the tip, and it feels a bit flat. in terms of opacity. So the value, it's all one value. So I'm just going to take a clean brush. I wonder if I should let me use a clean paper towel, cleanish paper towel. That way you don't have to look at my dirty paper towel. There we go. So because it looked flat and all one value, I'm just going to remove some of that pigment. Okay, so when you're looking to paint something and you want to create a really interesting composition, looking at your values and your range of values will help improve that composition. Okay, so even just by removing a little bit of that pigment, I feel has created a little bit more interest. I can maybe remove even a little bit just at the top here of that petal. Yeah, I like that. And then for contrast, I think I'll go in with that Perylene green in the center, and just push it in and encourage it to flow and see what happens. And that's really interesting. So at this point, if you feel like maybe you've taken away too much pigment, that's okay. Just dab off your brush. So I rinsed it, dabbed it off. I'll take a little bit more of that blue, but what I'm doing is I'm taking from that center of my pile. Oh, I went in instead of out. Taking from the center of my pile. So when I load my brush, I have quite a bit of pigment on it. And then I can even paint in a deeper value and create a little bit of shadow, which is kind of neat too. And again, just playing, experimenting, observing sort of what the colors look like together. And that feels a little bit heavy there. And again, that's okay. I wet my brush off, dabbing off the excess. And as it's still wet, I can blend and move that paint around. And it really is a process. Take your time as you're working in this style because there are different opportunities you have at different points of the painting while things are still wet, and that you can move them around. I'm just going to add a bit more green to that center there. And when you do sort of work in this way where it's a little bit slower and more controlled, again, you're in control. So as long as you are working with wet paint on your page, oh, that turned out so nice. So again, just taking a few more minutes and working on the values and adding a little bit more pigment to it creates a little bit more depth and interest. I'm going to go in with a bit more of that green and see what happens. Okay. So I'm going to do one more demo and then pause for questions before we just jump in. We're going to jump in and start working on our main spread. Leaves. So a great way, again, if you've taken watercolor made simple with me, you know my favorite way to paint leaves. You know what? I am going to challenge myself and keep using this brush. It feels different in hand, like it's even lighter in some ways too, but I think it's good. Good for a little bit of practice. So you can see that live too. I always like to start with painting a stem if I'm doing a longer branch or stem of leaves because that gives me a starting point. So with that starting point, I can go in again. It's the same sort of process with painting the petals. I can just go in and paint a single stroke. And even with this Terre Verte, so see how it has a little bit of streaking. It is not a fully pigmented, really opaque paint color. It really does have a little bit more, I feel like it's the gum arabic in it, maybe, or it's that quality of that initial pigment that creates a little bit more of the slip, which then lends itself to creating that really nice sort of streak so I can see the paper through it, and interest in my painting. So I'm even just going to play around with, because I'm getting to know this brush again, just even playing around with how little pressure I use to create these leaves, and how much pressure, just to see what happens. Again, it's a really great way to warm up by doing strokes like this to get to know your brush, and allows you to be more in control of your tools. So I'm going to pick up some of this Perylene green and just see what happens. I love the contrast actually. If I were to just put the paint down. And even doing this type of practice allows you to develop your repertoire of brush strokes for how you like to paint or how your hand interprets this type of floral painting. Sometimes I think about, I'm going to go ahead and flip the camera because I feel like I'm going to have a little chat with you while you're painting and practicing. I feel like sometimes when we are looking towards an outer source for what to paint, how to paint, colors to use, etc., we're focusing too much on what we're observing and not what we're doing. So if you can practice on these really loose brush strokes, simple brush strokes, loose brush strokes using colors consistently that you use in your color palette or your family of colors, it really helps you hone in on brush control, watercolor control, but also your personal mark making. So I can show you, exactly how much pressure I'm putting on the brush to create these petals and leaves and things like that. But your interpretation, it's like your handwriting, will be unique to you. So the more you can create in the sketchbook, and maybe this is your sketchbook to dedicate towards loose painting, the more practice you can put into developing your own personal marks, the more consistency you'll see in your watercolor painting, and the more style and uniqueness to you will develop. Okay, so maybe it's a challenge. Maybe it's your thing to do, over the course of the next few weeks, is really start to play with, pick your, 2 or 3 brushes that you like to use. And I would pick a large, a small, and a detail. So hold it against my white shirt. So a large, a medium, and a detail brush. So maybe only allow yourself to use these 3 size brushes. Maybe pick a color palette of 5 to 7 colors, and really get to know those colors, how they behave when they mix together, the brushes, and what kind of strokes you can develop. Even though I'm challenging myself to using this one brush, I truly do want to pick up my other brushes because it's habit, right? It's what I'm used to. So use those same brushes, use the same colors, work on the same type of watercolor paper, because then you'll know how much water you need on your brush and how thirsty or how, little water you need for that paper. Okay. So maybe that'll be the challenge. And if you do that, let me know how it goes. And does anyone have any questions while I'm in this view? So we're going to do one more petal. We're going to do actually like a closed bud. I'm going to have some of my smoothie and then see if you have any questions so far and how it's going. Maybe you're able to create these different styles of or different viewpoints of flowers. Are you struggling at all? Let me know. Mm. Oh my gosh. So, okay. So I'm just reading as I'm drinking. Kay is using some Sennelier paint she got in Paris earlier this year. First of all, lucky you're in Paris. Love France. Um, oh, interesting. Okay, so different paints, and you can read them. Maybe I should have read it out loud, but I was reading and thinking about Charvin, because I know Charvin, you can go in and create custom palettes. And if I go back to Paris, that will definitely be something that I want to do. Okay, got distracted. So Kay is talking about the different paints and the pigments and how the opacity changes, that mineralization changes, and how it takes a little bit of getting used to, even maybe. But she's noticing that these techniques are making the paint seem more transparent and granulated, which is kind of cool because I feel like that's when you can really start to see the quality of that initial pigment. So that mineral of the pigment before it's turned into paint. And then so now during that experimentation, that if you want to make them more transparent, just add more water to them. And I find even with some of the colors I swatched today for you, it's not until you add a lot of water to them that you truly get to see what the undertone and the color of the pigment is. So that's a neat observation. I haven't played with Sennelier paints. I have their oil pastels that I love, and their large drawing oil pastels. But I haven't tried their watercolor. I might have to pick up a color or two. Okay. I needed to wet my throat a bit. Let's do a little bud before we start painting on our spread. Okay. So another shape that I like to work with when I am working on a composition like this, and there are different things I want you to pay attention to. The size of the flower. So not only the direction that we're going to work in, but the size versus smaller flowers, the value. So we've got some darker elements, lighter elements. Also, these sort of long elements that pull you through the painting. So the shape also will help with composition. But the size of the flowers, sometimes I like to add in just little buds. I'm going to do that. Should I change brushes? Maybe just for this demo. I'm going to use this real hair. So it's Sable Hair by Winsor Newton and see how it goes. I might like it. I might not. We'll see. Let's use yellow for this demo. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of water to my yellow. So sometimes I'll paint smaller flowers. We'll do that actually. That'll warm up with this brush. So if I go in and just paint really quickly, and I'm telling you when we start painting, it's going to go quick. So maybe I paint a smaller flower just by using this different brush, and I can paint even smaller. So it's just how much I pull out and always working from the center. You'll make this petal a little bit shorter. So you can see already how quickly you can fill up a page using this technique. So we have some larger flowers, some nice lines with the leaves and some smaller flowers. But sometimes what I like to do as well is I like to paint just little buds. And so a little bud can be a flower that's just opening up. So that was just 2 strokes. I allowed a little bit of space. And when I start to add some green to it, hopefully you'll be able to see it a little bit more. So I'm gonna grab some Terre Verte. Oh, so I'm gonna get in nice and close. So this is something that drives me crazy with brushes. Do you see these little bristles that stick out on the edge there? So real hair, sometimes this can happen. Okay, and if you're noticing this is happening with your brushes, go ahead and add a bit more water. So I just dunked it in my water jar, and I'm just going to tame those little wild hairs. It's kind of like if you're like me and have curly hair on a frizzy day, we got to tame those hairs. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit of green on either side, and it just becomes this sweet little, oh, I went too heavy on the stem, but it just becomes a sweet little bud. Okay, I'm going to do that up close with yellow again. So if I am looking to paint a little bud, giving myself some space, so I've got my palette there, starting from the center, I'm just going to paint outwards. And sometimes I do 2 or 3. I might even change colors so you can see. So it looks like a flower that is younger, maybe just starting to blossom. I use Pearline Green at this point. You can even just touch it at the bottom there and create a little bit of a stem. So then that makes the observer think that it's a smaller flower or it's one that's just opening. And again, it's very similar brush strokes that we've used throughout each and every time. I'm going to move this over and start to get my page and frame. Okay, does that feel doable? How are you feeling? Maybe give me a thumbs up in the chat. Do you feel like you've got some easy brush strokes that you can lean on so that we can start filling our page? I'm going to get my desk ready so that you can see. And again, I really like the orientation. That's one reason why I designed, this is a reference book, but that's one of the reasons why I designed this landscape. I do paint a lot of landscapes, so it's really great orientation for painting landscapes. But I also do like to paint in this portrait angle as well. It just offers, again, something unique when it is a finished painting. So if you want to paint in this direction, please do. I'm going to paint horizontally only because it is easier for when I do these lives in terms of the angle of the camera. Okay. So I have my palette beside me. Maybe what I'll do is I want you to see my palette as a whole. We'll go this way. So I have my palette beside me. This process will go a little bit quicker because I have my reference piece ahead of me so that I can take a look at it. And I also have my references beside me. It's going to look completely different, but I think my goal is going to be to paint it so that it flows this way. So again, compositionally, we want to think about what we're putting down on the page, and we want to make sure that it's not haphazard. I kind of like things that are organic, but I also want there to be a natural flow so that your eye can follow through the piece in different directions, but they're not fighting one another. So they're not coming in at all different angles. There's a bit of a flow through them. especially when you're painting florals like this, you want there to be, make sure I have the right brush, you want there to be a little bit of a story, okay? So coming in from one end and coming out from the other, okay? So we're just gonna go for it. And as we start to fill the page, I'll be able to figure out, if I need larger flowers, smaller flowers. It might feel like I'm rushing, and it's because I'm trying to work intuitively. And if you're not able to follow along, don't worry because you can watch the recording, okay? So I'm loading up my brush. I did have a little bit of green on that brush, so it has tinted my blue, and that's okay. I kind of like it. We're just gonna go with it. And I'll start again, just trying to work intuitively. I don't want all of the petals to move in the same direction or be the same length. And I'm going to lay down a couple at a time. Okay, always working from the center out. I'll even dab in while it's still wet. And I want these to be fairly similar in size, and it's good if they overlap. Let them overlap and see what happens. I want them to be fairly similar in size, and I always work in odd numbers. So in design, apparently odd numbers are just more visually interesting. In art, the same is true. Maybe we'll do a little short one here, just again for variation. I kind of like how that flow goes. I thought I was going to go this way, but I think just naturally with the direction of my hand, we're going to go sort of in this direction. So there's 3. I'm going to add a bit of water to my brush to lighten that paint, and I'm going to paint maybe 2 more. And each time I'm challenging myself to change the direction of the stroke and how I'm laying down that watercolor. And I really like that more transparent because it gives me a different value to look at. And let's add one more here. And again, I'm kind of moving my body because I can't move my page. I could move my page, but again, I'm going to move my body instead. So you can probably hear my chair moving, or if you can see me. Okay, so that's a great starting point. I'm going to go in so that you can see that up close. And at this point, while they're all still kind of wet, I can go back and tweak. And because I've taped off my page, I like to go right to the edge. It's just going to make your finished piece look a little bit more interesting. Okay, so I'm going to go in. I really like the blue. I think there was a bit of green that mixed in with this blue. So I'm going to add, I want you to see that actually, some Perylene green. So I'm taking some of this green and I'm mixing it right into the blue, and it's kind of making this inky blue, which I'm enjoying. So happy accident, and I'm just going to follow it. I'm probably talking a little bit too much, so this is dried a bit. But again, just going into some of the centers of these flowers to again start to bring in that opacity. And maybe I want to go into the complete center. So mimicking veins or a bit of shadowing and seeing what happens and taking a moment to observe, cleaning off my brush, and even give yourself space. So as I zoom out, I can start to give myself a little bit of space from as I'm painting to see what's happening on my page too. Okay, so should we do a little bit of yellow? Let's add a little bit of yellow. I'm even gonna mix some yellow, I think, with this terre verte and see what happens. And again, just in the center, because it's gonna offer a little bit of interest as I'm working on those. So I'll take a little bit of the yellow and I'm going to pull the yellow over because I feel like the yellow might be, actually it may not be too bright. So I'm looking at the yellow in respect to the blue that I have on my page. And I think what I'll do is I'll start with the top right corner, and I'm just going to paint in some smaller flowers. I think I might even bring in the buff titanium. So again, going off my page, and turn your page if you don't feel like that's comfortable. And maybe I'll even do a couple of flowers that are pointing upwards. Again, getting used to this brush. Interesting process. And it's one I used to paint with all the time. So it's funny how you get used to your tools. And maybe that's something to consider is try not to change your tools and materials too much so that you are in that comfortable flow as you're painting. So I like that. So because I have quite a bit of yellow in that section or in that corner, I'm going to add just a touch of that yellow here. Same sort of idea with different size. And I'm almost just creating the idea of petals in that corner just to fill it in a slight bit. And maybe what we'll do even, let's go into that center. I'm going to mix the yellow with a bit of this buff titanium to see what happens. Again, not a color mix that I typically do, but I feel like it'll add, and I can even swatch it here. But I feel like it'll add a little bit of, it'll tone down the yellow because the yellow can be quite strong. And maybe even see what happens first. You can see I'm hesitating, so I'm testing it before I go. Okay. So in this section, I think we'll start right in the middle. I'm going to go upwards again to create some interesting petals. And I don't want them to be completely open from sort of looking downwards. I want there to be a little bit of an angle and movement. So similar to what we did with this flower here. So again, and I'm going to try to paint this one a little bit smaller. And if you're finding it difficult to change the size of the flower itself, go ahead and change your brush and see what happens. Oh, I quite like that actually. Change the size of your brush. Maybe I will switch brushes so I have a smaller brush to work with. I think I might go over here. And again, I sort of have a moment to think first before I put the brush stroke down, just to see if it's an angle that I want to continue with before I commit. I'm gonna make really short strokes there. Let me zoom in so you can see that. Okay, so that's really nice with the 3. I think I'll put 2 more over here before I go back to them. Oh, I wonder what will happen if I add blue to this mix. Okay, sorry, I got distracted. Let's maybe add ones that are looking upward here. And again, I don't want them to be too uniform. I like that actually. So let's do a smaller one here. And I can bring them in if they're too far from one another. So you can see your page quickly starts to fill in as you start to work because we're working on a small space with the big brush. And then maybe we'll add one that's kind of looking at the side here and just moving it around. Okay, and for the center of these ones, I'm going to use the Perylene Green, but add quite a bit of water to it, and we'll see how wet they are. And I like that contrast as well. Okay, cool. So now we have some larger flowers, some smaller ones. We have a little bit of variety of tone. So we've got some dark colors, some light colors. I'm really enjoying that. I feel like I need a little bit more, some greenery now. So I'm going to grab some of my Terre Verte. I think my next flower, I'm going to mix the buff titanium with the cobalt blue. I'm really curious to see what will happen. And one thing I noticed about this brush is it doesn't hold a ton of water. I want this initial sort of leaf to be a little bit lighter because I want there to be a bit of a background feel to what I'm painting next. So I'm just going to go in and start to fill up some space. So again, leaves can be attached to a stem or it can really just be on their own. I like to work in pairs like I just did to start with and get a feel for how it starts to look A, color wise, and B, compositionally. Okay. I wonder if I should put another flower here of green. I'm going to put some green just off to the side and start to see as it fills in. Okay, so a little bit more. I'm even thinking here what to put. So I'm going to go off. And as I start to put the green down, I've zoomed out because I want you to be able to see from a distance what's starting to happen. But as I'm starting to put that green down, even just little hits of color doesn't have to look exactly like a leaf. It's just giving that impression, because we're painting loosely, of a leaf and leaf forming on the page. Okay. And by adding more water to the mix, it can be very subtle, and then it helps me figure out composition as I go. I'm almost feeling like a leaf here, or sorry, a stem here and a stem there might be fitting right now. But I am going to change brushes. I want to use something that is a little bit thinner. So I chose, I think all my lettering has rubbed off. I think it's the number 4 in the Life I Design set. Just going to load it up. And I'm going to start with this Terre Verte, but I need less water and more pigment, because I know it's a really transparent pigment. So I guess similar to that Sennelier, that it was, I think, Kay who shared that. Yeah. So I want to make sure I have more pigment on my brush, and maybe it'll come in here. So I lay down the stem first, and then maybe this one. Again, I am thinking about composition. I press down a little bit. My hand is also resting, my arm is resting on my hand, or on the table if you can, to help with creating these straight lines. So I've got one line, 2 lines. I feel like I need another. And if it dissects this way, that will be interesting. Okay. And again, because now I have very fine lines in between what's happening on the page, that break in shape is starting to make this composition feel like it's starting to come together a little bit. I actually really like those lines on their own. Let's see if we can incorporate a few more. I like minimalism. I love how the lines feel. Maybe we can put another little one here. That could be a line. So again, if you had a plan coming into this live painting where you're painting loose, it all changes as you work on the painting based on what's happening on your page. And that's the process and the flow that I want you to be in. Okay. I am going to go with it. I feel like that's good. It gives me some nice movement. Okay, someone says, Suzanne says, love the Terre Verte. I know it's a great color. Just wait until you use it for landscapes. I have really been enjoying painting landscapes recently. At the end, I'm going to share some fun stuff with you, actually. Okay, so this is the Pearling Green, lots of water on my brush, okay? And I haven't even been testing out my mixes. You could do that on the opposite page. Like if I wanted to test out what that Terre Verte look like in terms of how much water is in my puddle and what that translates to on my page, I can. I think I'm actually going to mix some of this cobalt blue and yellow together. I want to see what that looks like, to see if it's a green that I enjoy. So sometimes I do that too. I'll mix colors on the palette that'll start to blend together. And that's when you get those interesting moments happening in your painting. So right now, I don't have colors mixing together. But if you have colors on your palette that you're working with, they're going to start to mingle and create, again, some really interesting mixes on your page too. Okay. So I'm just creating a little bit more opaque mix there. I actually am going to bring in some blue. So I'm creating a moment here on my mixing palette to hopefully have some greens and some variations start to mix. Okay. So we'll start with this green, and I'm going to work over here. And I think what I'll do is create some small, maybe some larger leaves here, and I'm changing the direction of my hand, but always working from the center out so that I can create some interesting moments with my brush. Okay, so just moving back and forth. You can zoom in so you can see that. And then while it's wet, I think I'll take that yellow that I mixed with cobalt blue and drop it in and see what starts to happen. So I'm just even connecting, and then maybe even bringing that lower stem down a little bit. So let's use that yellow blue. So I'm going to mix some yellow just a little bit more with cobalt blue on my palette. And let's do over here. And that gives me a nice green as well. And I'm going to put in a little bit more, just a bit more leaves around it. So this is where I start to look to fill up space as I'm working on a composition like this. I want to go to this one, but I feel like I need to fill up this space here. And I'm almost just pulling away from the center outwards. It's creating almost like a fern shape leaf, which I quite like. Actually, it looks really nice in there. I'll do that again in there and see what happens. Okay, so if I pull away, again, pulling away, and even if you're holding up your painting, it will help you look at perspective and see what's happening on your page. So I'll take again some of this green because I feel like this is darker, this is lighter. Maybe while it's still wet, I can add just little moments. It doesn't have to be as dark and opaque as this side, but when I add a little bit of that perylene green to this stem, it creates harmony, okay? Because I'm balancing the heaviness on this side by adding a tiny bit in this area here. So what I'll do is I'll go to this one, and this, I feel like I want it to be maybe a little bit smaller, more controlled, but I also want to add, just washing my brush off, a little bit of this yellowy green. So again, just looking for opportunities to mix color in my mixing palette I could add here to this stem. And because I changed brushes, it is a pointier brush, smaller. I'm able to get more controlled brush strokes, which for leaves, for me, works. Okay, you may want fluffier, larger brush strokes, and then you know that you should reach for a brush that has a little bit of a looser, fuller. Oh, I really like that. Almost looks like it's gradient. Oh, I really like that. Let me add a little bit of yellow to the mix here to make it even lighter and more interesting. I like that happy accident, a nice little gradient stem there, which is kind of neat. What are we doing for time? How's everyone doing? Okay, so now if I look around my composition, I have some nice big moments here. I've got some really nice concentrated lighter moments that bring my eye around the page. I actually want to see what the cobalt blue looks like mixed with the buff titanium. I think it'll be a really interesting mix that will add some interest to the page as well. Ooh, that's a really nice, it almost reminds me of a gray blue. We'll go ahead and swatch it here. Ooh, I really like that. So I think I will add that to my page. Look at that inky. Again, I'm thinking landscapes. I wonder if we have time to do a quick one. Okay. Let's see. So now I need some flowers that are maybe sort of mid-size. So I've got some larger ones, again, smaller ones. I think to fill up this little section here, if I use this new gray mix, I can put some in this area and it'll almost help us complete this page. Okay. I'm not going to speak while I'm doing this part, just so I allow myself to kind of be in the flow and see what happens. And then maybe I can critique after I've done that. Okay. So if you want to take a break and watch, please do. If you're in your moment too and you're just listening, following along, enjoy the process. Okay. Okay, that was pretty quick. And again, it may feel like we're the center of the flowers. I don't see them. This is a great opportunity to go back and start to drop in your centers. And because I used cobalt blue in the mix, actually, let me pull it so you can see what I'm doing. I think I might work tone on tone. So I've added a bit of cobalt blue to my palette here, just next to that blue and buff titanium that I mixed. And I'm gonna add a little bit of that buff titanium because I just want to tone that blue down a bit. I'm going to add it to the center and just let it bleed. So while it's still wet. And that creates a really nice tone on tone moment, but it also defines the center of the flower a little bit more. Okay, and that sort of multiple. And then I was thinking, let's put in a few buds that are just starting to open and think about what color we can do that with. And I think buff titanium might be a good one to use. So I'm just going to grab some of that buff titanium so that you can see the mix here. And then again, the angle may not be fabulous, but just putting down 2 dots of color or 2 brush strokes. Oh, I really like that as a little bud actually. And then I can even turn the page. Let's do that. Let's turn the page and see about, maybe leaves need to go in there. I can put in little buds in there and see what's happening. I really like that moment where I just sort of paint it in. You go in, can even overlap there. And it's starting to get nice and full. I'm starting to feel like just a few more leaves and it is almost done, and we can remove the tape. Maybe we'll do one in here too. So right now you can see that I'm just very lightly dabbing, creating brush strokes. And then by adding a tiny bit of green, I think we'll use this Terra Verde. So I've got my thinner brush as well. I can start to add just a bit of stem. And again, those little fine lines will help to unify what's happening sort of with the lines in these leaves and stems and go from there. I feel like here we need a little bit of green. I'm hitting it here. So now I'm just looking for moments to add a bit more of this Terra Verde and filling in some space. Ooh, what happens if we were to do a little bit of line? Ooh, I like that. So again, just thinking about how we can add a little bit more a unique shape with the brush strokes, as well as color and filling in the centers. In here, I was thinking to add a little bit of depth to the center. So I'll start with Terra Verde, knowing that Terra Verde is a lighter pigment. It's not as opaque. I can commit without having to commit with a lot of dark color, which I'm going to go in next to add sort of a final layer. I think I'm going to add some of the Payne's Gray. So again, just sort of finding those moments and maybe even getting a smaller brush. So my detail brush, my number is 0. Go in and grab some, there we go. So you can see that really nicely. I'm going to grab some of this Perylene Green. And now that everything is starting to dry fully, I probably should have started at the top since I'm right-handed, but I can start to add, again, a deeper value, creating some moments where I can add, ooh, I really like that because it's still wet. Creating some moments where I can add a little bit more interest. And what happens is that draws the eye in. So if I pull away again, see those nice deep moments there that I've just added? It makes you feel like there's a little bit more detail in the flowers without having to create a lot of detail because we're just adding smaller brush strokes and deeper pigment. I thought I would use the Payne's Gray, but I really like this Perylene Green. Let's add tiny, because these are little flowers. So just tiny, tiny brush strokes and moments. And I even think I toned the paper before I started in that example that I showed you. And I can even just go in and define very lightly. So using very light brush stroke, because I like that line. I think I just put my hand in something wet. That's okay. Because I really like that line and I want to define it, I can even just add in a little bit And I just dip my brush in the water if I wanted to create again some moments of just lines. Doesn't have to make sense because we're filling composition. I can enhance that one. Or we're filling in space. I use a little bit darker. It creates movement. So I'm going in different directions throughout the piece. So compositionally, again, makes for interesting movement. It makes your eyes sort of look around and observe what's happening. And I think we've almost filled it. Feels pretty good. So I'm looking at my screen. I've pulled away a little bit. Quite like it. The only thing that I would say at this point, before we call it done, if you feel like these larger flowers need a little bit more definition, I'm going to show you how to do that, okay? And then I think it's time for the paper pull. So I'm going to use this Princeton Neptune brush, just why not challenge myself even more? Change my tool once again. Let me go ahead and load it up with some of this cobalt blue. I'm going to test it out first on this page, but I want to create some added interest in depth and doing that tone on tone. So a darker value. Let me zoom in here. Just again, because I feel like I need a little bit more interest on these larger flowers. They look flat. And the way that we create that interest, again, think of working in like a darker tone. Okay, so just going back over in some places, and that starts to look like shadow. Okay, we can do that for the yellow flowers too. Those little ones almost need a little something too. And you don't have to do it to every petal, but I kind of pick and choose. Like I really like the lightness of that petal, but I almost pick and choose what would maybe be shadowed and creating a little bit again, just of interest to those centers. So I feel like that helps. And the yellow could use a little bit of a boost too. And I'm not sure if I should use, let's mix a yellow green. Oh, even zoomed in, that looked really good. So looking at my palette here, I'm going to mix for these yellow ones, and I'm going to change brushes, I think too. I'm going to mix a little bit of cobalt with yellow. That's quite a bit of cobalt. So I want like a yellowy green that we can mix. I have a little bit too much paint on my brush. Here we go. So I wanted more yellow than green or than blue. So I got a little carried away, but that feels really good. So I think what I'll do now is using the same brush, I'm going to go in and just hit some of the areas of these flowers here too, because they do feel a bit flat to me. So again, they need just a little bit more. And see, as I'm hitting it, it just creates that bit of definition. So the yellow isn't just a single value tone. We want a little bit more. And I love how that looks, how that green has blended up into the yellow. And I'm even just following the direction. Oh, this one went the other way. The direction of that petal too. And again, so here it's really, and it looks different in person than on camera, but it looks like a flat value. So by just adding a little bit of that greeny yellow, it builds it up a bit and create some interest. And even down here, we can just add a bit of interest to it. See how it changes it slightly? Actually quite pleased with that. I think it's time I'm ready to pull the tape off, which is going to make a huge difference. So you don't have to wait till it's fully dry. I actually recommend that you don't wait until your painting is fully dry before you rip the tape off, because what will happen is it will tear the top layer of your paper. Ooh, look at that clean frame. Is there anything better than a clean frame? Look at how good that looks. And it's so different. I'm going to put them side by side. So I painted it in this direction. I really love the angle. I almost feel like this one could use a little bit more strength, but I'm not going to worry about it. I love the movement. And even if I were to turn the page, it still works in this direction. I could even probably turn it upside down and it would work. But let's compare it to the one I use for reference. And you can see they're similar, and they're similar because I painted similar style flowers, um, and because we use similar color, but it's never going to be identical. And every time you paint in this style, you'll end up with a new result, but you're working on, I'm going to go ahead and flip so I can chat with you a little bit. when we do this style of painting, you're working on so many watercolor techniques and essential skills that you don't even realize it. So we worked on a little bit of color mixing, so I'm not going to focus too much on that, but brush control, um, composition, values, making sure that you had balanced value, and even again, because I was talking and trying to work through the process, but it's even just working on that intuitive flow as you're working with your watercolor. So if you can continue to paint in this style, I hope you're going to, I hope you're inspired to, those are the things that I would recommend is work in this sketchbook and maybe fill this sketchbook with loose floral paintings. And if you do, please show me. I want to see it. That would be really cool. And maybe I'll dedicate a sketchbook to that. I like to do that. I like to theme my sketchbook sometimes, but use the same color palette and continue to explore that color palette. And I mean, mine is very cool. It's very limited. I don't have any reds, so any warm tones. But if you had a range of colors, and again, maybe 7, where you have all of the colors, so your red, blue, yellow to start with, and then pull in your favorite. So again, the Payne's Gray, which we didn't use today, I'm surprised, but we used the Pearline Green, so maybe some darks. It will allow you to really get to know, again, that color palette using the same brushes. You'll understand what kind of strokes you can create. And then the paper as well, because that will determine how much water you use in your paint mix, as well as are you able to build that transparency and opacity. Okay. Looking at the end result, I'm quite pleased. I'll flip my camera again, and then we've got time for questions. So hopefully you'll have some questions for me, and even let me know how you enjoyed it. But even just looking at the page, although it's not an expected color palette when it comes to florals, it's still a really beautiful end result. And it is a simple color palette. So really, when you think about it, we have yellows, blues, and greens. So very complementary. They sit beside each other on the color wheel. And then that added depth and a little bit of value range is really interesting. And I mean, this one really caught my eye actually. But I remember now I toned the base of the watercolor paper with some buff titanium. So that could be something really fun that you play around with too. If you lay down a color first, so that you can paint over top of it and see what happens. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you have any questions. How'd you do? Maybe you don't have questions. Maybe you want to tell me that you loved it, or maybe it was hard. And if it was, that's okay. We just pushed your muscle memory a little bit, like working out at the gym when you maybe you're lifting a little bit heavier. Okay. Of how you went back in with the second layer on the petals. Oh, so glad, Dee. And Dee, you've been in my orbit for a very long time. So that's awesome to get that feedback from you. And I think even, as I develop as an artist myself and an instructor, right? There are things that I think about. I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could teach this and how I would teach it and how I would explain it. So that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Good. Oh, I'm so glad. Oh, Jill, I hope you felt you were successful and that you've got the starting point. And I mean, observe flowers in nature. Like I truly did use, and I've got the bouquet behind me. Actually, these were from a hike that I took on the weekend, just wildflowers growing through. I do grow the forget-me-nots, but just wildflowers in our trails, and I took some home with me. And it's great if you can use them as reference, but even looking at these flowers, like we have some petals here. I'm going to pick this off. So you can observe in person how things grow, what the shapes look like. It helps you with how you can express them using just a brush without having to draw. Okay. And then I think that is a big goal. Let me turn my page so I've got a fresh page. And then I have something exciting that I'm going to share with you first. So even looking at the way this flower grows, let me zoom in. So it actually grows from this sort of bulbous point, and then it has a longer center, and then the petals come out. So could you imagine using this for reference and turning it? And how would you express that with your brush? And then looking at the center, again, that's really interesting, very similar to what we painted today. But I don't paint with a lot of violet colors. So A, I'm looking at the color. And then B, I'm looking at how many petals. C. I'm thinking about the center, and I don't know if you can see the center as easily. There's a bit of yellow there. It's a nice close-up. Sorry if my nails don't look great. I've been gardening. Green, so you've got some green and purple. That would be really cool. And then that green stem. So just by this tiny flower, I'm inspired, and I probably will sketch it. I'll let it sit there. I'm inspired by how I would express it using pencil, using my brush, even looking at different angles. And then when you practice that, that could be a flower that you bring into your repertoire of florals when you're painting. And what you can do is use your sketchbook to document it. So you can, again, sort of paint a full page using that single flower as an inspiration. And because you've practiced it so much, you're creating that muscle memory, and that flower becomes one of the flowers that you can paint when you're doing an intuitive loose floral painting like we did today. Okay, that's how you can start to paint using references that come from you versus looking outwards to instructors, to other artists, to other references, and you build your own repertoire of how you paint, what you paint. So when you sit down with your sketchbook and your supplies, you don't need a reference. You can just free flow and intuitively paint like this. And that ultimately is my goal for you. I want you to come back and learn and observe and all of those things. But I also want you to be in moments where you can sit down and paint what you love and what you enjoy and what you know, so that you have ease in that process. Okay. Okay, let me share something really fun with you as we're doing this because I feel like I'm a bit fired up. I haven't done these lives in a while. I think it was when we celebrated my book anniversary that we did. Kelly, are you coming in October? I have something else to share too. I'm so excited. I have so many little gifts. I teach art retreats in Europe, and they are a treat. They're a big commitment to go to and to experience, but they are so fun. I'm starting to gather little gifts. And I don't want to give away too much, but I am so excited. I'm actually really excited for that trip. Um, I have been painting a lot, like I said, these last few months, and I haven't been able to share yet, but I'm working on different things to help you in your painting process. And the one thing that I do miss is painting live like this and sort of being in that community. And there's always projects that I want to work on and things that I want to develop to help you through your process. But I also am finding that I've been quite busy. So for me, I'm looking for moments for when I can paint like this with you. I can help you through your process, but also be in my artistic process as well, because it's in that personal process of mine that things like this come to life. It's truly when you create and can be in your process, there are so many opportunities for creativity that you can't even imagine and happen. So if you've ever painted with me through the watercolor lounge, that was a really enjoyable experience. It was one that I actually loved, but I felt like took a lot of my time and attention. But I've always wanted to go back to that style of teaching. So I'm in the process of announcing, and I think it might even be going out today. I'm starting a new experience where we can paint together monthly, interact more as a community, and have it be a way that doesn't require a lot of your time or focus. Because I feel like we have a lot of things that we focus on with the internet, social media, everything available to us, that it almost dilutes our experience because we're spending too much time consuming and not enough time doing. But I'm starting a new monthly membership. It's called the Artist Lounge. It'll be delivered to your email, but will also be interactive. We're going to be doing monthly paint-alongs like this, as well as some recorded elements. And it'll be just a gentle nudge throughout the month to help you in your personal art practice. It'll be watercolor focused, but I'm bringing in some more bookmaking and collaging. I'm just looking at my creative table that I work at. We'll use some ink pens and some watercolor pencils and different mediums. And again, it'll be a little bit of let me guide you, but I'm going to arm you with some prompts and some things so that you can go off and paint on your own. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of feeling like I'm leaning to my art practice a little bit more these days. I feel like life is busy, our world is a little bit crazy. My kids have just, one has moved back, the others, they're all graduating, like our personal life is a little bit crazy. So my art practice for me is my sacred time and my sacred space. So I want to share a little bit more of that and what I'm doing in that sacred space. So that's happening soon. If you can join me, fabulous. If it's, not a thing you can do right now, that's okay. You can come and take a look at what we're doing and hopefully be inspired, and maybe approach it. But I also have a few other things that I can't talk about. But anyway, I'm really excited. It's been really great to be painting so much, but I want to share and I haven't been able to. So today was great. The artist lounge is going to be great. I'm just looking at questions here and getting distracted. What's the best way to wash brushes? Great question. I'm going to take a sip of this. That's a great question, Jan. I love watercolor painting for this. I take my little water jar that we've been using, and I don't use a deep one because I don't want the wood part of the brush to get wet. So you see some artists will use like a bigger container, maybe like a yogurt container. I don't like that. I like to use a shorter one because you can see the wood part of my brush doesn't get dipped in. It's not clean water, it's the water we've been painting with. I just kind of dab it off and I leave my paper towel and my brush on my desk to dry. That's it. I never rinse my brushes under running water. I don't feel like I have to. I only use my watercolor brushes for watercolor paint. And for as long as I've been painting, so this Princeton Neptune brush, although I haven't been using it since I developed my own brushes, I've had it for maybe 20 years. Okay, so brushes are the one thing that they require a little bit more investment, but if you take care of them, you won't have to replace your brushes. And truly, I paint with, you can see I don't have any writing on my brushes left because I paint with them daily. And I haven't had a hair fall out, I haven't had any problems. And I think it's because of those two things. So not dipping your brush fully in water, just allowing the water, even if it comes above the ferrule, if you're laying it flat to dry, it should be fine, but not dipping it in a ton of water and then just rinsing it off and laying it flat to dry before you store it upright if you store your brushes upright. And I certainly do, but I mostly, the ones that I paint with on my desk consistently are in a tray. And I think I've shared this before, but if you're new, it's, I think, an olive dish from like the home decor section of a store. So it's made for olives, maybe bread, but I use it for brushes. Because why not? It's the perfect vessel, perfect shape. Okay, you need to practice. This helps you learn. Oh, I'm so glad, Jacqueline, and come back to it. So yes, and when you change papers, especially, you need to change the amount of water sometimes, but practice will allow you to create that knowledge and experience. Because I can describe, but it's until you're using your tools, and sometimes, your hand is different than mine, so you might add a bit more water than paint. Your pressure might be different. The humidity or lack of humidity in your room will affect the painting as well. Okay. Someone else is coming with me to Portugal. Okay, what's your first name? I do have a list of everyone's name. I'm so excited. So I do have more retreats coming for 2026. It's something that I really am enjoying doing, and it's just being able to be in person. So make sure you're subscribed to our newsletters, so you can get that information. Kelly is asking about new classes. So Kelly, I have a really great offering of classes that are in depth when it comes to watercolors, botanicals, sketchbook, landscape, that this membership program where I'm taking you on a journey to further expand your experience and your confidence and your art practice is what I'm being drawn to. I, for 3 months, sat on a class idea that I'm like, yeah, this will be a great class. But it was almost like I wanted to take you on a longer journey, which inspired the Artist Lounge. So hopefully you'll come and join. It'll be $5 for the month of June. So come and see what we're creating for you. And the price will go up from there. And what you're getting is going to be amazing. It'll be a really great experience. And the exciting thing is, I should tell you, is my kids, who are not kids, they're in their 20s. They're both artistic in their own fields. One's a journalist, he's a fashion writer, just finished his master's. My daughter is industrial designer, ceramicist, artist. They're actually coming into the project with me and creating with me. So it's a really interesting mix, and you'll get a sense of that. It's not just watercolor, it's a whole philosophy around creativity and art making that has been really beautiful to create so far. Um, oh, thank you, Kay. Thank you. That's awesome. I love being in this space. If time, please show a landscape. I think we've gone over time, but Suzanne, come join the Artist Lounge. No soap. So Jan's asking about soap. No soap. Watercolor pigment reactivates. So if you feel like your brush, and it's funny because I look at some of the colors of my bristles, they're a little bit stained. That staining won't translate into a lighter color paint. I don't use soap, any solvents on my brushes. You don't need to with watercolor paint. And again, that's the beauty. It's like not as heavy, chemical based, just need a bit of water to rinse them. Okay. Brushes, I'm not sure, Leslie, if we're bringing them out again. I don't have any plans for right now. But again, email, if you are part of the email list, we always launch there first. So yeah, I would like to order them again. But Donna, awesome. Yay, Portugal 2025. It's gonna be so good. But yeah, if you stay connected with me via email, then you're the first to know. We're always launched our email first. Oh, so glad, Tracy. I hope that you can recreate that being engrossed in the moment and really enjoying what's happening on your paper more often than not. Thanks, Noelle. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow if it's the same Noelle. I was thinking about you about tomorrow's live. I also lead LifeView Design, which is helping artists through their art business. And we're doing a live tomorrow, which I'm actually really excited for. That'll be a good one. So thank you. We're just wrapping up. It's been about an hour and a half, which is crazy to think about how quickly today flew. Thank you again for supporting my collaboration with Etcher. I really hope that you enjoy filling the pages of your sketchbook. And when it comes to sketchbook practice, try not to be precious about it. Sometimes when we work in a bound book, we feel even more pressure that every page needs to be beautiful. And I certainly showed you some pages that weren't beautiful. They're one of the pansies. I was in my greenhouse. I had pansies. It didn't turn out exactly as, I would have expected or liked, but the process was really cool. I played around with some cool purples, and I was using what are they called? The brushes that have a water brush. So it wasn't my usual tool. I was literally had it perched on my knee, and it was just all about being in the greenhouse and in that space, and being able to bring my sketchbook with me. So don't worry about every page being a gorgeous finished piece. It shouldn't be. It should be your own personal account of your journey that you're going on. And I think with social media, we feel like everything needs to be polished. And I am telling you that every page is definitely not polished. Even my Happy Holidays one that I did share on social media, I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, that's not one of my most favorite pieces, but that's okay because it's part of the process. There's a landscape one using some Terra Verte and Ash Marine Blue. It's another color by Winsor Newton that just brought out the revival colors, which I'm sharing a little bit about on social. It's another favorite color for landscapes, which is really cool. Okay, so I talked to you about tools, supplies, artist retreat, the artist lounge, which I'm really excited to relaunch that next week. Portugal's coming up. We have more retreats that are coming up for next year, and maybe even more in person, and a new book. Did you guys hear that? I'm not allowed to share, but I just whispered it. Could maybe guess, maybe put it in the chat. And if you guess right, then I'll just wink. And then that way I didn't share it. But anyway, just more opportunity to paint and have fun. And yeah, just connect with your art, which is what I always want for you. So yeah. And it's so good. I cannot wait for you to see the painting projects, but not supposed to tell anyone anything about it, but I did tell you, which I had to. Amazing, amazing. Okay, thank you so much. It was so great to see you all. Dee, everyone, thank you for always coming back and being in my orbit. And if this was your first time with me, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you in the Artist Lounge. And if not, that's okay. We've got lots of emails coming up for you and lots of things for you to continue to work on. And if you are continuing to work in this theme, let me know. Share with me, send me an email, tag me on social. I'd love to see how you interpreted today. And how your pages turned out. And as you're filling in your sketchbook, even let me know. I would love to see because it helps inspire what I work on and want to share next too. So that's pretty cool. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye everyone.